Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This will be my full Mandalorian Season 3, Episode 8 finale video. There are a whole bunch of Easter eggs and references, so we'll break it all down. Also helping set up what's happening during the Ahsoka series. So we'll also explain what's happening next, like the Mandalorian Season 4, the Thrawn movie, everything else. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the episodes. I will be doing full episode videos for Ahsoka when it starts really soon. Careful for spoilers for the episode if you haven't seen it yet. We'll just start at the beginning, work our way through shot by shot, talking about Easter eggs and WTF moments. Even though it seemed like there were some big final moments for characters like big endings, I don't think that they're completely gone. Mando, Bo-Katan, and Grogu definitely had the high ground, but I do think that Moff Gideon will return.
It's over, Anakin! I have the high ground!
The whole title of the episode was The Return, which is meant to be a reference to the Mandalorians finally returning to Mandalore, the planet as Bo-Katan the armor always wanted to do. Relighting the Great Forge is a big symbol for their people retaking the planet, a reference to the Mythosaur returning, paying off that big Grogu Easter egg, Grogu speaking to giant animals like the Rancor. And it's a reference to Grand Admiral Thrawn returning to the regular part of the galaxy as they teased previously this season, the heir to the Empire, signaling the beginning of a much larger war between the Remnant Empire, the New Republic, and the Mandalorians, the restored Mandalorians, or they're in the process of restoring their race. As we push into the Ahsoka series, which is set during the same time period, it's sort of like the next part of the story. They're getting ready to film The Mandalorian Season 4 later this year, and then obviously eventually we'll get to the Thrawn movie, even though they haven't said exactly which year that's going to be released.
One of the terms we use is, the war between the New Republic and the Remnant Empire. So we're going to see, you need a conflict, and I'm, just kind of looking at a lot of the things that were written over the years in various expanded universe projects.
It sounds right now like the Thrawn movie where the Mandalorian characters, the Ahsoka characters, the Skeleton Crew characters, any other spin-offs that they might do between now and then all cross over and fight Grand Admiral Thrawn won't happen till like the second movie that Lucasfilm releases. I believe the first Star Wars movie that they're going to release in 2025 will be that sequel movie set 15 years after The Rise of Skywalker, but they haven't completely confirmed that yet. That's just a theory right now. The actual opening scene of the episode picks up immediately after the end of Episode 7 with Bo-Katan, the other Mandalorians, still escaping on the ground, running from Moff Gideon's Supercommandos, Eggs.Grogu still in flight with his jetpack heading into orbit to bring support back, and bring back that crazy assist with the giant cruiser, RIP to the giant cruiser. At least they were able to use it to get rid of Moff Gideon's base. She also has to quickly explain what's been going on to Eggs.Grogu, who's been in flight this whole time. He didn't learn about the rest of the secret base that had been there the whole time. Like, we know you're heading back to the fleet to get support, but by the way, there's been a secret Imperial base here for this whole time since the Great Purge, so we need to do something about that too. I was a little surprised to see how quickly Grogu saved Mando using IG-12's body from the Supercommandos. Like, he's clicking the no button. They use that a couple times in the episode with him clicking the no and the yes. I wasn't expecting him to save Mando until Mando had actually been taken into that debriefing room, but I think we all assumed that he was going to be the one to save Mando. It was meant to be a big callback to Mando saving Grogu during Season 2 in Moff Gideon's prison cell. I think the reason they did it this way, the reason why it happened so quickly, is just because the run time of the episode was so quick. Like, it was actually a pretty short episode for being a finale. Mando and Grogu have a bit of a bro-out moment where they fist bumped and agreed to go smash the hell out of Moff Gideon and his men. Like, we need to get rid of them, or they're going to continue being a problem coming after us at every turn.
And Hulk. Smash.
So it's like Grogu agreeing to Hulk smash, but using the Force on Moff Gideon, the Supercommandos, and the Praetorian Guard. And smash them he does. Like, he winds up going full Hulk on the Praetorian Guard. Elsewhere, Bo-Katan, the Mandalorians continue their escape, making it to the surface with their jetpacks, as Moff Gideon continues deploying his TIE Interceptors, his TIE Bombers. He has a pretty sizable force in that base, even though it didn't seem that big. Remember, during Episode 7, he requisitioned way more TIE Fighters, Interceptors, TIE Bombers, so his forces were actually meant to be pretty big. And when the Super Commando comes to inform Moff Gideon of the attacks in that same room where he met the Shadow Council, you notice that the Super Commando's voice is different. That's just to confirm that all the Super Commandos were meant to be completely different from the Force-sensitive Dark Trooper clones of Moff Gideon himself that he was creating those cloning tanks. So like, all the Super Commandos weren't his clones. They were completely separate people underneath that armor. And the clones were meant to be those next generation of Dark Troopers, the super Dark Troopers that he mentioned, with the prototype armor that he had been wearing himself, the Maul DeLorean-inspired armor with those helmet spikes. All the clones would have been wearing that type of armor. So had Mando and Grogu not destroyed all of the clones, eventually they'd have to deal with an army of clones of Moff Gideon who were all Force sensitive. Even though the number of clones he had there weren't that great, it sounded like eventually he would just create more and more of them. One of the interesting things, though, is that when you see Moff Gideon looking at the holo map of Mando and Grogu, you see the red tracker and the green tracker for the two of them. I actually wondered if they were going to answer who that other spy was, and they were going to say that he had planted some tracker on Mando or something like that. It didn't wind up turning into anything, so you can let me know in the comments who you think the other spy was, because the whole reference in episode 7, the title, The Spies, meant there were multiple spies, and it sounds like there was supposed to be one inside the Mandalorians. Maybe they just haven't revealed that yet. Maybe they're just waiting to season 4 or till the Ahsoka series or some other series to actually pay that plotline off. Everybody been wondering if it was the armor or if it was Eggs.Grogu or if it was some other character. The way they played in the episode, it seems like the armor was not the spy. Like, she seems completely genuine. Eggs.Grogu actually seems like he's still genuine. So as far as we know, it was something completely different. They abandoned that plot line or something else completely was going on. Mando then gets some help from R5 to find Moff Gideon's central command center inside his larger base. His map of the base made it seem like it was pretty big. The command center, though, is that central location where he was looking at the map just a second ago, and where he had all those galaxy-wide Zoom call meetings with the rest of the Shadow Council. We see R5 has the same type of thrusters that R2-D2 did in the prequels. He never used them in the original trilogy, so either they've been damaged by the events of the original trilogy and never fixed, or you could just chalk it up to George Lucas not having the technology at the time to film a scene of R2-D2 flying through the air. They have a couple funny scenes with another Imperial mouse droid, like the mouse droid keeps harassing R5 and he keeps shocking it away, which is another reference to R2-D2 doing similar things, using his shocker during the prequels during the original trilogy. And just in general, the whole scene of Mando, Grogu, and R5 sneaking through Moff Gideon's Imperial base is meant to be very reminiscent of the Death Star scenes in A New Hope, with each of the groups trying to sneak around avoiding Imperial troops. Like during A New Hope, you have R2-D2-C3PO hacking into the Death Star to find plans, helping Han Solo, Leia, Luke Skywalker, and Chewbacca.
Thank goodness they haven't found them. Where could they be?
How are those schematics coming?
The only difference this time is that they swap in some of the Mandalorian theme music while it's happening, like a chill version of the Mandalorian theme. Eggs.Grogu arrives on the capital ship, sends the rest of the Mandalorians down to the planet to support in the fighters, using the capital ship as a decoy for the TIE interceptors and the TIE bombers, just so the armor and the fighters can actually make it to the planet's surface. Then Mando, R5, and Grogu all tag-team the gauntlet of Supercommandos and shields we saw earlier. This actually plays kind of like a video game sequence with R5 disabling shields one at a time, and Mando and Grogu slowly fighting their way through each shield, although it's mostly Mando during this scene here. He even starts using one of the stun pikes that he takes off the Supercommandos. They're the same basic weapon technology that the Praetorian Guard were using, that Moff Gideon was later using, and the same ones that General Grievous's men were using in Revenge of the Sith. You notice they were enough to pierce Paz Vizsला's Beskar armor, so they are meant to be pretty strong, and it looked like Moff Gideon's version was like a Beskar spear combined with that stun technology, which is why Bo-Katan couldn't just slice it in half with the Darksaber. They have that funny scene of the mouse droids trying to gang up on R5, but it's just meant to be pure comedy because they're so ineffectual. Like, they're mouse droids. I thought they were going to have some surprise, like maybe they have some secret super weapon in these tiny little mouse droids. But nope, they're exactly what you thought they were all the way since back in A New Hope. Just little tiny mouse droids that couldn't do anything. One of them even just drives right off of the cliff face without R5 having to push it. That's how weak they are. Grogu and Mando make their way through Moff Gideon's cloning facility with all the clones of himself meant to become those next-generation Dark Troopers with Grogu's Force-sensitive DNA. They use this scene for a little bit of jump scares, a little bit of horror. I think the idea here is they wanted these to be kind of a reference to Snoke in The Emperor. The whole idea with Snoke is that he was supposed to have been one of many failed clones of the Emperor, and the Sith Eternal on Exegol had been trying to clone him for many, many years unsuccessfully. Because it is implied they never got Dr. Pershing's data, as Commander Hux spoke about with Moff Gideon.
Project Necromancer is in place for that. What has become of Dr. Pershing and the research you promised us?
The First Order's Project Necromancer, like he said, oh, you have all this cloning data, this new Force-sensitive being Grogu, you need to give that to us so we can complete Project Necromancer. Which clearly Moff Gideon didn't want to have anything to do with. Like, Moff Gideon did not want the Emperor to come back because he wanted to be in charge of the Remnant Empire. even though during this whole scene, Grand Admiral Thrawn was their de facto leader. Like, they all thought of Grand Admiral Thrawn as the heir to the Empire, as the original Thrawn trilogy book says. But the whole idea here is that Moff Gideon kept that research that allowed him to perfect his clones, as he complains about later, to himself, and he never gave it to the other members of the Shadow Council before his base was destroyed. Which is why, during the sequel trilogy, you wind up seeing Snoke, because they weren't able to get the perfected technology. They give Grogu a bit of a jump scare when one of them opens its eyes in the tank, but the way that Moff Gideon explained it later is they had not opened their eyes yet, like the clones had not become conscious yet. It was more of an automatic response by that body in the tank. So RIP to all those Moff Gideon Force-sensitive super clones. You can let me know in the comments if you think that he had another one hidden secretly somewhere else, and he'll try to transfer his consciousness to that, because he's probably like this burnt charcoal briquette Anakin Skywalker style after this episode. I think the idea, though, in this episode is they're meant to move past that cloning storyline. Like, this is the end of the Grogu cloning storyline, and we won't see any more of these Moff Gideon clones in the future. Bo-Katan and her Mandalorian group continue their escape, hiding out in the nearby caves, with the group that stayed on the planet explaining that there are caves like this with plant life, with farms all over the place, because they've slowly been cultivating new farms, clean water, food hidden all over the planet. And all these different plants are meant to be the original type of plant life that grew naturally on Mandalore before the Mandalorian Civil Wars basically killed all of them off, turning the surface of their planet desolate. If you didn't watch the Clone Wars, or if you haven't read any of the Legends books, even before the Great Purge, the planet of Mandalore, like the surface, was completely uninhabitable after years of civil war. The Mandalorians themselves basically just wasted their entire planet, which is why they all lived in dome cities during the Clone Wars. When the Empire bombed the planet during the Great Purge, that just made things even worse. It was already pretty bad on their planet. This is just meant to show in present day that the planet itself is habitable right now, so they have everything they need for their people to move back to the planet's surface right now. It's meant to tie in with the whole theme of the episode, the season, of the restoration of the Mandalorians, them going back to the old ways that they used to follow, like, this is the way of the great Mandalore, as they say, this is the way. The whole idea with their culture, though, is they're going to continue to rebuild their main city, Sundari here, like their capital city. Eventually, they'll do this for the rest of the cities on the planet, but that's something that would take generations to complete. Even with an army of droid labor, you'd be talking about rebuilding massive cities, repopulating an entire planet. And even though there are a bunch of scattered groups of Mandalorians out there in the galaxy who will slowly start to rejoin them, they're still only a fraction of their former population. So a bunch of Mandalorians need to start screwing each other and making more baby Mandalorians, as well as taking in more foundlings from other races like Grogu and even Mando himself, who was a foundling. And in many, many years, assuming they survive the events of Grand Admiral Thrawn into the sequel trilogy, even by that time, they'd still only be at a fraction of their former population. Then the armor returns with the Mandalorian reinforcements. They have a massive jetpack battle in the air with all the Supercommandos, and it's meant to be a good example of what it looks like when an army of Mandalorians are all in battle together. They kind of did this during the end of Clone Wars when they were retaking the planet from Darth Maul and his Shadow Collective. They'll probably do another version of this in live action, like a big Mandalorian jetpack air battle, once we get to the Thrawn movie too. Usually that's where they spend a ton of money for big stuff like this, big special effects. Mando and Grogu then fight Moff Gideon, who confirms all of our theories about his Force-sensitive clones, like his grand plan to create this giant Force-sensitive clone army. He gets super pissed off at Mando that he broke all of his action figures before he had a chance to take them out of their wrapping and play with them. It sounds like Moff Gideon was really, really excited to mass produce those clones using the Force, like basically commercializing the use of the Force, the only thing that I never had. The whole idea with Moff Gideon, if you didn't get this vibe before now, is that he is meant to have been a Mandalorian fanboy, like he's obsessed with Mandalorians. He wasn't born one, he wasn't part of their people initially. He was just a normal person who rose through the ranks of the ISB, the Imperial Security Bureau. Those are the people you see during the Andor series that wear the white uniforms. Orson Krennic, the person who's building the Death Star, is also part of the ISB. They're meant to be the information-gathering arm of the Empire, which is why Moff Gideon was telling the Shadow Council that secrets were his stock and trade, because that's all about what the ISB does. At some point after the events of the original trilogy, then he became a Moff, or during the events of the original trilogy. But it sounds like when he was still part of the ISB, like the regular Empire, and they were executing the Great Purge, he had been obsessed with the Mandalorians. And it also sounds like he'd always been obsessed with the Force too. I don't know if he also knew that Anakin Skywalker had turned into Darth Vader, or if the fact that the Emperor himself was a Sith master. But it sounds like his interest in the Force just goes back for a long, long time, like predating the events of the original trilogy. It's kind of the same thing with Grand Admiral Thrawn. Like, Grand Admiral Thrawn isn't Force sensitive himself, but he is very curious, very interested in the use of the Force. Not quite as obsessed as Moff Gideon, though. Like, he's not quite as unhinged as Moff Gideon was in this episode. I just did a big video about why Grand Admiral Thrawn is so interested in Force users like Luke Skywalker, Grogu, Ahsoka, Ezra Bridger. I'll link that video down in the description below. But the whole idea with this Moff Gideon fight here at the end is that his next generation Beskar Dark Trooper armor is meant to give him a huge power upgrade against Mando. So even though he himself isn't that powerful of a person, like he's not super strong himself, the actual armor suit acts kind of like a mech. Like you can hear the servos whirring when he steps around. Like it seems like it's really heavy. So it enables him to soak a lot of damage and also to throw Mando, Bo-Katan around pretty easily. It's kind of like IG-12's body giving Grogu all this extra strength. Even though his new Beskar armor is meant to be more Mandalorian inspired, like the Mandalorian Supercommandos like Gar Saxon with the pointed horns on the helmet, just in general, a lot of Moff Gideon's black armor is meant to be more of a Darth Vader reference, which is why Giancarlo Esposito said he made such a big deal about having a space cape when he came to The Mandalorian in Season 1. Like, I need to have a cape, just like Darth Vader. The difference with Darth Vader's armor is that it was actually Sith tech armor, like it was Sith armor, and most of the suit was actually medical-based Sith tech designed to help keep him alive because his body had been damaged so badly on Mustafar. That's why he had to spend a large portion of every day just sitting inside the Bacta tank stewing so that he could keep walking around. Like, that's how much his body hurt. He was constantly in a state of pain, and the Emperor even specially designed his Sith suit to help keep him in that state of pain in order to make him more powerful in the dark side of the Force, because the dark side of the Force thrives on that negative emotion. So the whole idea with Darth Vader is that the angrier the Emperor kept him, the more powerful he would be in the dark side of the Force. It brings new meaning to the idea of just living this tortured life, like he was literally tortured every minute of every day. But during this Mando, Moff Gideon, Grogu fight, in the background you can still see all the Mandalorians mid-battle in the air with their jetpacks fighting the Supercommandos. It's actually a really cool way for them to use special effects to connect both the separate battles, making the whole thing seem like a way bigger fight, like a way bigger war, as opposed to just cutting back and forth between both groups fighting. They started to do this on a movie scale too, like obviously in the movies they're much bigger because they spend way more money on the special effects. So once we get to that Thrawn movie, you'll see more stuff like this where big battles are happening all over the screen at the same time and they just zoom in on different parts instead of cutting back and forth the old way. Then the Praetorian Guard step in, join the fight, obviously way too much for Mando by himself, so Grogu steps in, as we all expected. He's separated into the central command room too, but I think the joke here is that Grogu isn't trapped in the room with them, they're trapped in there with him, like full Watchmen style. Bo-Katan winds up saving Mando from Moff Gideon so she can have her rematch with Moff Gideon using the Darksaber. And in order to match the Darksaber, Moff Gideon whips out a new type of stun baton. This seems like a larger version of the same type of weapon the Praetorian Guard are using, made of Beskar. Like Mando's Beskar spear with the added stun weapon, so Bo-Katan can just slice it in half. Back in the command room, the Praetorian Guard make pretty quick work of IG-12's body. They are meant to be pretty badass, even though Grogu does smash the hell out of them Hulk style. The whole idea is the Praetorian Guard themselves weren't meant to be Force sensitive, but they're meant to be the fiercest fighters in the entire galaxy. The Emperor turns them into his personal royal guard, and they're just still around now while they're trying to execute Project Necromancer, bringing him back to life in a clone. So even though Grogu winds up killing the Praetorian Guard in this episode, their group is the same group that we see later in the timeline. They're basically trained in pretty much every martial art you could think of, every type of fighting style, they use every type of weapon, so they're just meant to be the most badass fighters you could possibly think of, next to actual Jedi or Sith. And it takes Grogu and Mando tag teaming them to actually take them down. When he starts throwing them around the Force, that's meant to be a callback to him doing the same thing to Moff Gideon's regular stormtroopers during Season 2, like Hulk smash. Loki would be proud. Moff Gideon's TIE Interceptors and the TIE Bombers disable the cruiser, so Axos uses it to kamikaze destroy Moff Gideon's base. RIP to the cruiser, was an awesome ship. They'll have to steal more Imperial capital ships when they can in the future. Remember, there are several other members of the Shadow Council, each with their own Imperial fleet, so there's still tons of Imperial capital ships out there to be stolen. Big surprise, Moff Gideon winds up crushing the Darksaber. We'll see if Bo-Katan eventually has it repaired. Even as a symbol, they don't really need it anymore. There are people already following Bo-Katan. They've rallied together. It's still a very badass lightsaber weapon, very effective in battle. so I'm assuming they try to repair it by the events of the Thrawn movie. I mean, that's a ways off, so we'll probably won't see the Darksaber for a while, maybe with a little help from Ahsoka in the Jedi Droid played by David Tennant. If you didn't see my Ahsoka trailer videos, David Tennant is confirmed to come back as the voice of that Jedi droid from the Jedi ship in the Ahsoka series. He has the schematics of every lightsaber ever constructed by the Jedi going back many thousands of years. Like he himself, the droid, is meant to be over 1,000 years old, so he's way older than Yoda was. If you were trying to build a lightsaber or rebuild or repair a lightsaber, he'd be the one to actually help you do that if you actually needed help. Hoping that someday Grogu also does construct his own lightsaber, so maybe the Jedi droid could help him out then too. I believe all the scenes that we got of him are in a combination of Lothal in present day and then in Ahsoka's ship. I think he's been flying around inside Ahsoka's ship, staying with her. Then Mando and Grogu return to help Bo-Katan tag team Moff Gideon, and Axwo destroys the rest of his base while they're fighting him off. Even Grogu helps out using the Force to disable him. And here's the thing with Moff Gideon's end. So a lot of questions, a lot of theories going on here. They make it seem like he dies in the fire from the explosion. I think the idea here, though, is that because the title of the episode is The Return, they also want to make this seem like a reference to Anakin Skywalker burning on Mustafar, with Mando, Grogu, Bo-Katan having the high ground. So early theory, Moff Gideon survives this as a charcoal briquette, Darth Vader style Anakin Skywalker, and will return in The Mandalorian Season 4 in the Thrawn movie, but I still like the theory that Thrawn is the one to ultimately kill Moff Gideon for trying to usurp him, or just because he grows tired of Moff Gideon, the same way that Darth Vader was famous for killing his own Imperial commanders on a whim. George Lucas has talked about this whole concept in Star Wars just in general, the idea that evil eventually destroys itself, and even though Grand Admiral Thrawn isn't technically meant to be evil, he's more of an antagonist the way that they portray him, like he has noble intentions and he just does horrible stuff in the pursuit of those. Ultimately, the Remnant Empire will help do some of the New Republic in the Mandalorians' work for them, destroying each other. And it would be much more poetic to have Grand Admiral Thrawn be the one to actually permakill Moff Gideon for his previous failures, like, you are useless to us, we don't need you anymore, so goodbye. After the battle, there's a short time jump and the armor continues performing Ragnar's christening ceremony, like him taking the creed from episode 1, because during episode 1, his creed ceremony was interrupted by the Crocolas, so he hadn't officially become a Mandalorian yet. This time, they're able to do it in the living waters the same way that Din Djarin and Bo-Katan did during Episode 2. All these scenes of the Mandalorians at the end are meant to signal this new era for their people, period of restoration for them, in preparation for Grand Admiral Thrawn and the larger Remnant Empire forces. The other members of the Shadow Council still out there, and there are a bunch of them, each with their own fleets, which are pretty large. So, like, just because Moff Gideon is gone, this is only the beginning. Even though they don't directly reference Paz Vizsla, remember, he's Ragnar's father, I think them performing his christening ceremony here, him taking the creed, is also meant to honor his father, so to speak. Now he's officially a Mandalorian. You also remember that this character is also played by Jimmy Kimmel's real-life nephew, I believe. You also notice in the background of the chamber here, they've hung the banners of all the different Mandalorian groups, as well as the banner of their culture, like the Mythosaur banner, which just represents all Mandalorians. The blue banners have Bo-Katan's Night Owl symbol on them. The green banner, I believe, is meant to be for that new group. I think the red banner is meant to represent the Armor's Children of the Watch group. But the idea behind all of these banners here hanging is meant to represent all the different clans coming together. They would have hung this way in this room before the Great Purge, so they're just kind of putting things back to the way they used to be on the planet. The reason why Bo-Katan's banners, though, are hanging the highest is just because she is their leader, so it's like the place of prominence within their culture. Big surprise, though, wasn't expecting this to happen so soon. Mando brings Grogu to actually take the creed, paying off him becoming Mando's son and becoming a Mandalorian formally, which started way back in Season 1, like this whole arc of him being Mando's son. The Armorer even called him Mando's son during Season 1. I guess she considered it temporary at the time because she referenced Grogu's biological parents from Yoda's race in this episode. I know there's a billion questions about where Grogu actually comes from, who is Grogu actually. Dave Filoni, Jon Favreau had explained that Yoda and Yaddle were not Grogu's parents, like his parents were just other members of their race. It's just that their race is so rare that you don't see members of them born very often in the galaxy. Even though they had all these cloning storylines this season, he's not meant to be a clone of Yoda either, like he's a completely new member of their race. And when you're talking about Mando becoming his father formally, like adopting him formally, Bo-Katan also kind of became a surrogate mother to him this season, even though they don't have her actually speak up here, so she's not formally his mother or anything like that. The other interesting technicality here too, the armor brings up, like she's all about the rules, like let me pull out this giant list of rules about actually taking the creed before we actually do this here, is that Grogu can't actually physically speak the words, and you have to be able to do that to take the creed. Even though a couple times this season it seemed like he was speaking words in his own native language, like Yoda's race's language. There have been a lot of theories about how he would actually speak. The way they explain it is that Yoda was the only member of his race that spoke that backwards speech, and he did it that way to honor his own Jedi Master who spoke that way. But Yaddle, for instance, spoke the basic tongue, just like all the other people like Qui-Gon Jinn, all the other Jedi Masters, all the other regular people. Implying that once Grogu eventually does become able to speak basic language, he'll speak normally like Mando does. And the other interesting thing, just talking about the timeline, Grogu eventually maturing, being able to speak, they just announced a new Star Wars sequel movie set 15 years after the rise of Skywalker. By that time, Grogu would be close to the same age Yoda was when Yoda became a Jedi Master, like close to about 100 years old. So Grogu would be fully grown and have long since been able to speak normally like everyone else. So he could wind up appearing in that movie, the full Chad version of Grogu. That as the armor recognizes Grogu as Mando's official son, his new name becomes Din Grogu. They're probably not going to use the full name that many times. They'll probably just continue to call him Grogu. But every once in a while, like when he goes back to see the armor will probably refer to him as Din Grogu. The armor, some of the Mandalorians are just really formal in that way. He gets a big upgrade from becoming a foundling to the next level in their culture, becoming an apprentice, which really means that more is expected of him. He'll start going on more missions, and there's the journeys, like the adventures that the armorer teases, like you need to take him on his journeys, which is basically just taking him to have a bunch of experiences, adventures around the galaxy. Gaining experience on the job, so to speak. The other interesting thing here too, this is meant to be a bit of a teaser for Season 4 in the Thrawn movie, like everything that'll happen with the Mandalorian and Grogu in the future, separate from this Mandalorian storyline during Season 3 of them all coming together and retaking the planet. The armor telling him to go off and have adventures, go have journeys with Grogu, is so that the show can move past this Mandalorian Season 3 storyline where you had to keep focusing on all these other Mandalorian characters like Bo-Katan, like the Armor's group, like the other Night Owl characters. There were a lot of complaints this season that Mando felt kind of like a side character and Grogu felt more like a prop in their own show, even though the Mandalorian title is meant to reference all the Mandalorians on the show, like it's not just meant to reference Mando or just meant to reference Grogu. But the fact that Grogu took the creed and is now a member of the Mandalorian culture does pay off the long-running theory that we've had since the beginning that eventually the title will be a reference to Grogu himself. But the whole idea now is that they've separated Grogu and Mando from this larger Mandalorian Mandalore storyline so that Season 4 can be more classic like Season 1 was, with the two of them going on bounty hunting missions and not having to go back to this giant Mandalore storyline every single episode. They haven't completely said what Mandalorian Season 4 is going to be about. They just teased that they're ready to film it by later this year. So I think a lot of what happens during that will depend on what happens during the Ahsoka series with Grand Admiral Thrawn coming back and what Ahsoka, Ezra Bridger, Sabine, Wren, all those characters are doing. And while this is happening with Mando and Grogu in Season 4, them going off on different adventures in Season 4, they could say in the background, the armor, Bo-Katan, the other Mandalorians are rebuilding the planet Mandalore off-screen, and Mando and Grogu will just come back and visit every once in a while. Then they pay off the long-running fan theory about Grogu speaking to the Mythosaur through the Force, asking it to return to the surface. Even though they don't actually show it returning to the surface, they just show it waking up, so they're just implying that, oh yeah, like the Mythosaur, it's back. We'll see it more in future seasons. Because it's so huge and probably pretty expensive to do with special effects, they're also probably saving a lot of really cool Mythosaur scenes for that Thrawn movie. Cannot wait to see Grogu riding that Mythosaur. Like Mando, Grogu, Bo-Katan, it's big enough that you can actually put most of the Mandalorians on the Mythosaur's back. Then they have a special ceremony to relight the Great Forge with the Mythosaur banners all around, the symbol of the restoration of their people. Like the Mythosaur is the symbol of all Mandalorians. They have a big For Mandalore cheer, which is a callback to Star Wars Rebels, where they had a similar type of scene where Sabine Wren gave Bo-Katan the Darksaber in the first place for the first time.
I accept this sword for my sister, for my clan, and for all of Mandalore.
For Mandalore! For Mandalore! For Mandalore! For Mandalore!
Not only is the Great Forge the symbol, the heart of their culture, a symbol for the restoration of their people, it's also a giant forge that you can use to make really, really big, really powerful weapons, armor for giant armies, which is going to be really important for fighting Grand Admiral Thrawn. The other idea here too is that they gain access to the Beskar on the planet, so they just have all the materials that they need to rearm their people and probably their allies too, the New Republic, if they start working together. Mostly this is about the Mandalorians right now though. Speaking of New Republic though, short time jump later, Mando and Grogu go back to Adelphi Base to see Carson Teva and his Rangers. This time, there's no cameo from Zeb that I could see or Deborah Chow or Rick Famuyiwa, but Rick Famuyiwa did direct the episode, and we do get a Dave Filoni cameo wearing his trademark hat very prominently too here this time. Like he's sitting in clear view of the camera, just sort of teasing the idea that the Ahsoka episodes are coming because he directed and wrote most of the Ahsoka episodes. We also get a much better look at the bar. You notice they've decorated with the helmets of stormtroopers and other droids that they've killed. It has a giant probe droid head as well in the center. Grogu notices the IG-11 head. That's not their IG-11, but they explain they use that to restore their IG-11 because they've been searching for the memory circuit all season long, and now they found it. The other funny thing about this Grogu scene at the bar, even though he's like wolfing down all these treats, is that I think this is the closest we've heard to Grogu speaking actual words, even closer than earlier this season when it sounded like he tried to say, "This is the way."
It's not him, kid.
Like in the future, Grogu will try to talk more and he'll warble more like this, and it's just him speaking in his own native tongue. And as part of Grogu's training as an apprentice, Mando forms a contract with the New Republic to become a bounty hunter for them on the DL. Like he said, please don't tell the actual New Republic. We'll just keep this between the two of us. Because he does need money and it's good experience for Grogu in training. And this is just what they're going to be doing between now and the events of Mandalorian Season 4. Even though he might have a cameo scene with Grogu during Ahsoka, kind of expecting a couple cameo scenes during Ahsoka. But between now and Season 4, he will just be on regular bounty hunting missions. They go back to Navarro and he presents Greef Karga with a rebuilt now IG-11 using that head that they took with the memory circuit so he can become Greef Karga's new marshal, paying off a couple big storylines here from Episode 1. The storyline about Greef Karga trying to get Mando to become his new marshal. And they pay off Greef Karga offering him a place to live, which he accepts this time, a little cabin outside the city. When he says a place to stay between adventures, that's also just a reference to him visiting Navarro periodically. Like, all these characters will still be part of Season 4, the Thrawn movie, but they're not going to spend every single episode on the planet, obviously. And it's not like Mando is retiring or anything like that. They move into their little cabin, Grogu playing with the frogs in the Force, meant to be a bit of a callback to his training with Luke Skywalker on his Jedi Academy on Ossus. Same basic scene, RIP to that frog. Even though he plops it back in the pond there, he's probably going to try and eat that frog pretty soon. And they wind up ending on a traditional Star Wars-style circle transition to credits. George Lucas used these types of transitions during the Star Wars movies all the time. The whole idea heading into Season 4 and the Ahsoka series is that Bo-Katan the Armor will continue to rebuild the Mandalore planet, restore their people. More Mandalorians will start coming out of the woodwork, flocking to the planet, rejoining them. Mando and Grogu will start doing more traditional bounty hunting like they did in Season 1. The Remnant Empire, the Shadow Council on their side of things, will continue just working in other parts of the galaxy, the other sectors that they control. And Grand Admiral Thrawn will slowly start to marshal his forces, which we saw in the Ahsoka trailer, after returning from the Outer Rim, thus the title of the episode, The Return. Many things are returning in this episode and this part of the timeline. Overall, it was a pretty solid finale. They wrapped up a bunch of the big storylines. Like I said, I think they're moving completely past this Grogu cloning storyline, even though you're still kind of wondering what happened to Dr. Pershing. Like, did Elia Kane wind up killing him? Obviously, she's still alive. There's still a couple big plot threads that I'll address when I do a Mandalorian Season 4 video in the next day or two. I was a little surprised we didn't get a cameo scene from Ahsoka or Sabine Wren, because Sabine is a Mandalorian. You'd think that she'd be interested in what's happening with the Mandalorians here. There were a lot of rumors about Boba Fett maybe having a cameo scene too. But the way Dave Filoni said that they structured the finale is that they didn't want it to feel like it was being hijacked just to set up the Ahsoka series, and they wanted people to be able to watch both shows, like watch the Mandalorian show and watch Ahsoka, without being forced to watch every single other show too. Even though I would definitely recommend that you check out some of the Star Wars Rebels episodes before the Ahsoka series starts later this year. But don't worry, I will do a bunch of Ahsoka bonus videos too after we get through talking about all the Mandalorian stuff and setting up Season 4. If there's any other big Easter eggs or references that you noticed in the episode that I didn't talk about in the video, or big plot points that I didn't cover, just write them below in the comments and I will address them in my bonus videos. So my Mandalorian Season 4 video will post next, and then I'll start doing more Ahsoka videos. Everyone click here for that Mandalorian Season 4 video. I'll update the link as soon as I post that, and click here for all my Ahsoka and my Thrawn videos too. Thank you so much for watching. Everyone stay safe. This is the way.